Mark and Barbara moved here from Missouri almost a year ago, leaving family and friends behind. They have always been adventurous and have endured some great journeys, both literal and figurative, together. Along with being a renowned author and speaker, Mark was a professor at Ozark Christian College for 22 years. Through it all, Mark and Barbara have 2 children who love Christ and are involved in ministry. They've been married for 28 years and they know what it's like to work together. Hi, welcome to Neighborhood Group. We're here talking with Mark and Barbara as we begin this last week of our series called 3. And tonight we're talking about working together. But before we begin, why don't we just start off answering this question in our groups? Why don't you talk about the best team experience that you've ever had growing up? Maybe it was a team that you were on or a group that you were a part of. How did you experience teamwork at an early age? Let's start off by talking about that question. Welcome back to our final episode in our 3 series. And tonight we sit down with Mark and Barbara. And first of all, guys, thanks for letting us in your living room.
Welcome to our home.
The whole goal of this series was just to get to know you guys. 3 couples, 3 weeks, 3 principles that will govern your life. And so, again, we're excited to learn from you guys tonight. And so as we get started, why don't you just take it from the very beginning? Why don't you talk about your families growing up?
Okay, well, I grew up in a family of 5 children. My parents were married for 62 years, I think, before my mom passed away. And very solid family, grew up in the church, became a Christian, was baptized when I was 9, and was always involved in youth group and went to church regularly. And I think probably in early high school is when I really felt like I had my faith of my own, and it wasn't just, I'd been going to church, but I really felt like it was my own.
My family was quite a bit different. We grew up in Sacramento, California, and my parents got divorced when I was 12. My older brother, 14, my younger brother, 11. So my parents actually raised me in the church. When people ask, well, how did you get your faith? I actually got my faith from my mother, who left the family and also left the church at the same time. And I don't want to put everything on the divorce, but it really did mark my childhood. Pre was mom and dad, although honestly, because my mom was really busy with finishing up her PhD in psychology, and my dad was, trying to make a living and pay the bills, we spent a lot of time with babysitters. And I really have more memories, playtime, with people who are not part of my family, babysitters and things. And then, they did a great job, and I never doubted that I was loved. But I don't have a lot of memories of, sitting around a campfire or family board games, things like that. So that would probably be the big marker for me.
Talk about that time then when you did decide to become a Christ follower.
I remember for me, my brothers, my two younger, the younger two of the three, we were all baptized the same day. It was kind of a family decision. For us, I think it was a new beginning. I think we had gone to church and gone through the motions a lot as I was a younger child. And then as this became more of a catalyst to the discussion of it all, then the three of us decided together that we would, become Christians and be baptized together and have that beginning. So
I was baptized on my 9th birthday, and it was legit for me. I remember standing in a circle after I was baptized, a wet white robe. The old traditional baptistry is back behind the sanctuary. I remember the preacher was there, my parents were there, my siblings were there, and I recall very vividly this warming sensation that literally filled my body, that I attribute to the presence of the Holy Spirit. I mean, not that I was a kid who grew up in church and loved God, but that was a defining moment for me. And the other one was before my freshman year in high school, where I was at a Christian camp and had always, since I remember, wanted to be a surgeon, particularly interested in brain surgery. However, a 12, 13-year-old figures his vocation out. But that was a real wrestling time. And so for all of those kids who are 13, 14 years old and really hearing a call of God, and parents say, "No, I don't think that's, it can't be a call of God, you're just a kid." I would just challenge every parent out there, you better rethink that. Because for me, as a pastor of this church, it came when I was 14 years old. And it wasn't me deciding to do ministry, it was God calling me away from maybe childhood dreams, but there's a conversation I had with God where God said, "Do you really want to heal brains rather than souls?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And he just kept pushing me in that. If you've ever argued with the Holy Spirit, you're not going to win. And ultimately, the Spirit impressed on my mind, this is my call for you. And I said, I've given you everything. I've given you my whatever life I had. I was going to drive. When I got old enough to drive, I was going to give that to God. I gave him, my relationships as a kid. I'd given God everything. And I said, I've given you 95%. All I'm asking is my vocation. And I distinctly remember, Dennis, this voice in my head say, "Well, aren't you glad Jesus didn't give you 95%? And I just threw up my hands and said, "Okay, I'm done." And that really was my distinctive call of God, really as a teenager, changed the course of my life. Why I'm here today.
Absolutely. So you were both believers then, well before your high school days, kind of growing up. Well, talk about then how you met.
You want to tell the story?
Well, I can start and you can correct or whatever.
Well,
So.
you're never wrong.
Well, I actually was going to go to school in Kansas and pursue speech pathology. And my older brother was a student at Ozark Christian College in Joplin, and he kept on me saying, you know, you really should just go for a year. Just go for a year and get 1 year of a Bible college education underneath your other education, just for a good, solid, you know, core before you go into whatever profession. And so I thought, well, what's it going to hurt, you know? So I decided I would do that, go for 1 year, and then transfer back to Kansas and do that. And God had different plans, I guess, as we look back.
I didn't know anybody at Ozark when I went there. All I knew is they put out preachers. So I'm trying to meet friends. Some of the guys on the dorm floor said, let's go play some flag football. It was behind the girls' dorm. So I'm out there playing with a guy named Don, and I look over my shoulder and there's a goddess standing there. I mean, I'm smitten. But I thought she was an older student. I thought, a freshman, I don't have a chance. But I asked Don next to me, I said, who is that goddess over there? And he goes, it's my sister. I said, you're a liar. Nothing that good looking will ever come out of your family. And I'm actually goading him to introduce me. And Don wasn't that clever. He did introduce us. And sure enough, it was his sister. And so I still didn't think I had a chance until we got into class, freshman class. Here comes this goddess. I would say she walked into the room. The truth is she floated. It was like this, you know, immaculate impression. And I'm sitting in the back. I see her do this several days, and I'm sitting, she was, you know, a teacher's pet, so she sat down front, and I'm sitting up towards the back because I'm not, and there's an empty seat next to me. I swear, this is the coolest thing I ever did, maybe the only cool thing I've ever done. I look at, she walks in, and I catch her eye, and it was one of those slow motion moments in life where she's just kind of floating across, and I look at her, and our eyes lock as she's floating, and I look at the empty chair next to me. I look back at her, look at the empty chair, look back at her, and this is all I did. And she did. It was over from there.
Is that really how it went down?
Well, we'll let it be that, I guess. A lot of it. He does like to embellish a little bit, but yeah.
Mark?
Yeah.
The floating part didn't really
I
happen. The
don't
rest of it
remember
is
ever
spot
floating.
on.
So let's take it from there. Like you meet, and then marriage.
We started dating a couple of weeks after that, I guess, and dated through college for 3 years, and then got married. And then Mark finished his 2 more years. Is that right? 2 more years for his degree, and then we moved to San Antonio. So looking back, I mean, I just keep saying, looking back now at all the things that have happened in our lives, I can see where God was moving such a long time ago to put us where we are today, and even throughout our ministries to prepare us for those times, even when you're a child, you know, the things that you experience.
Let's talk about those experiences. You guys have had an adventure. You've done a lot of things. So take us through some of those adventures you've been through there.
God has been extraordinarily kind to us, and I feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes, and I have about 10 more lifetimes I want to live. But we started our ministry at San Antonio, Texas, a little church, 65 people. It was a bilingual church, both Anglo and Hispanic, and so I'm 23 years old. I've got no business being in ministry, but that church was so gracious with all the mistakes that we made, and so kind to us over the years. It wasn't an easy place to live, and it wasn't necessarily the best church in the country, but it was our church, and we loved them. And though the salary was pretty low, what do we need? We were young and in love, and we had a little boy there, and he grew up in San Antonio. I don't think he wore pants until we moved back to Missouri. It was just a great...
Long pants. He wore pants, shorts.
Yes, we were
right,
not nudists, that's true. But man, in those early days, I wasn't speaking like I am now, obviously, wasn't traveling like I am now. So we just laid a foundation of digging into people's lives. Our location here has a little bigger footprint, but our heartbeat's the same. We just want to love people one person at a time, take them where they are, and lead them to Jesus. I just celebrated a 50th birthday. It's kind of a milestone birthday. I can't remember a birthday that I've enjoyed more, with people surrounding me that I've loved more. I've only been here 10 months. I feel like this is my family. I mean, when you ask about our great experiences, it really is more about relationship. Yeah, we lived in Prague when I was finishing my degree, great experience. We've been able to travel together to India, to Russia, Great Britain. I mean, we could tick off a number of countries to do ministry together. I think relationships are home for us, which is why we can be comfortable in any country of the world, in any climate of the world, as long as we are able to proclaim Jesus Christ and make him famous to people. We're going to be pretty happy.
Why don't you talk about then some of those ingredients that are central to your relationship?
In my vows, when we got married, I remember, I think maybe the only thing I remember was that I wanted to be committed to Mark to do what I could for him so that he could be the minister that he was called to be his support, just to encourage him and be there for him and help him to do that ministry, and so that we could do that together.
And obviously, you hear me talk about making Jesus famous. That's not my life goal, that's our life goal. And you're not going to hear Barbara probably preach a sermon on stage. That's not, it would probably be terrifying. But every time I get up to preach and teach, every time I do some writing, every time I do some teaching with the staff, she's a part of that. Because her support of me is not like auxiliary to what I do. It's not a kind of behind the scenes of what I do. She is with me every time I'm on stage. She's with me every time I open my mouth to speak. She's not just a soulmate. The Bible's right, you become one flesh. And she has forsaken a career, and really more than career, she has forsaken some of the niceties of life. When you deliberately decide, and this isn't for everybody, but when a couple decides that we're going to live on one salary so that the wife will completely support that one person's goal, there are financial sacrifices that really have tangible results in how nice a car you can drive, or how many bedrooms of the house that you can have. And you look around here, we're not hurting. The Lord has been incredibly generous with us. Barbara's goal has been to support me in preaching and teaching. And for those who have appreciated my contribution to ministry, they really need to know that there is a woman behind me that is essential to everything I do.
Guys, there's no doubt that working together takes teamwork. A lot of effort goes into that. And so what I'd like for your group to do over the next couple of minutes is choose 2 of these questions and answer these together as we talk about teamwork. how does your marriage work? How does this teamwork happen on a week-to-week basis when it comes to resolving conflict and when it comes to just, doing ministry together?
And we're terrible people to ask about resolving conflict because we're both pouters. I mean, this is the honest truth.
We don't like conflict.
We will be,
neither
that's
one
right,
do.
we'll
We
be
don't like
married
it.
29 years this June, and we have never once raised our voices at each other. Now, we've held grudges for several days, which is totally unhealthy. We probably need a little more shouting and a little less pouting. But the other, I think we really are so much on the same page generally. Here's something that I've observed in the two of us. When we have tension, like when we'll pout and it goes from a day to 2 to 3, we always know that we are like a rubber band pulling apart. We're going to snap back together. Now, some people's rubber bands snap, and that's a bad thing. But for us, we were both committed the day we got married. We would never consider divorce, and we would never consider adultery. So she's my only option. So if I don't fix it, I have to live with it, because I'm not going to leave her for another woman. I'm not going to engage another woman, and I'm not going to divorce her. So I have to fix it. And once you kind of get in your head, this is the only option. You have to fix it.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about one other thing with that, just kind of how our marriage works. Barbara, she recognizes the importance of meals together. And as I think back through our raising of our 2 children, both of them are in ministry and both of them are happily married. The number one thing that happened was not my great devotions. I mean, this will surprise some people. We don't sit around the dinner table talking theology and the deep truths of Scripture. We talk about our day. And I don't want you to think, we were just, a Leave It to Beaver family. We're always happy, and, I bring her flowers each night and the kids all sit at my feet and worship me. It really, it's not like that. Some of those dinners are tense because we had teenagers, and there were a couple of years there that I wanted to wear a striped shirt to the dinner table because of tension between Barbara and Megan. But we still kept eating, and ultimately, there was this season for my daughter. She was a great girl. Outside the house, she was a great girl. In the house, she was differentiating from us. She was needing to become adult on her own, and so, man, I remember one time Barbara came and she was just in tears. And she said, my own daughter doesn't love me. And because I knew better, and I think deep inside Barbara knew better, but her feelings, sometimes when you feel that tension, you can't imagine that the other person actually loves you.
Even though she, as a teenager, didn't quite know how to express her love for me, she still, and I knew that. I knew she loved me. But there just were times that you just wonder as a parent sometimes.
And all my daughter was doing was trying to be her own woman, and Barbara was getting in the way. Darn her. We wrestled through that, and we kept the practices that made us a family, the meals together, prayer together, sometimes just sitting over a cup of tea and talking over an issue together, not slamming doors, and not allowing kids to be gone for days at a time without interacting with us. Just the practices that made us a family, we did those when they stopped being fun. And as a result of that, we kept being a family. And now, my daughter just had our first grandson. And Barbara was out there when it was kind of a difficult, she had a C-section, and Barbara was there, and they asked her to stay in the house with them and care for them. And then when it was time for my daughter to go back to work, Barbara flew back out and cared for them. And multiple times my daughter just kept saying, "Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here." The reason my daughter was so glad Barbara was there is because 10 years ago when she was a teenager and didn't want her to be there, we refused to go away.
The Bible has a lot to say when it comes to unity in our families and in our marriages. It is no simple task. What I'd like for you to do right now is read some of the passages on the screen and then press play when you're ready to continue. Guys, as you know, it is hard to practice love in the context of marriage. It seems like life continues to bombard us with all kinds of distractions, all kinds of temptations, and life never turns out like we expect anyway. And so, for the next few minutes, why don't we discuss this as a group? What, in your opinion, are some relationship killers? Or maybe think about it this way. What are some things that try to sabotage God's idea of unity and love in your family? And how can we guard against that? Why don't we talk about that for the next few minutes? life isn't always easy. Life is real, and it doesn't always come, the challenges don't always come in the forms that we would hope. So how did your faith, how did your teamwork help you in those challenging times?
I would say probably the most challenging time for me has been in 2000. Well, our son graduated high school, you know, and you go through, everybody goes through, if you have children, you go through empty nest, children leaving, you know, they leave, they're deciding on a vocation. Everybody, eventually your parents are going to pass away. You're going to have life-changing issues and stuff like that. But in 2004, when Josh graduated, he was looking at going to Africa. And so he went for a summer to do that. Fine, he was praying about that, and Georgia, where he is now. And that summer, the week he was coming home, my mom passed away. And so we actually went to Kansas City, picked him up, drove to Colorado for her funeral. And then a year later, our daughter has graduated high school and is getting married. And then a year later, my sister passed away all of a sudden. And so I kept going through this cycle or circle or something like that of a major life issue hitting me. And about the time I felt like I was about to pull out of it, something else would happen, you know. And a lot of the things were good things. In fact, my mom's death was a good thing because she was suffering with illness. And so, but it's still difficult to go through that. And I thought that I had mourned her passing before she passed. But Mark even said, don't be surprised. And sure enough, you know, times would come and hit me and I would just start crying because I didn't have my mom, even though for several years she wasn't able to speak, you know, she still was there. But I always knew that God was there, and I always knew that Mark was there, and I always knew my kids were there and they loved me. But life issues just kept hitting me. And a lot of times when these things happen, people will say, it's a desert experience. And I told Mark just a few weeks ago, I said, I had to come to the desert to get out of the desert.
Well, I was terribly confused. You know, here my wife is, at one point she said, I think I might be clinically depressed. It scared me because, I mean, what do you do?
Well, and I had already gone through several years of thinking, I can't be depressed. I'm depressed. No, I can't be depressed, you know, thinking I'm a Christian. There's no way, you know, and I'm a minister's wife. I'm a Bible college professor's wife. I can't be depressed, you know, surely that's not. But
yeah, so
with hindsight.
There's all that pressure of saying we're supposed to be examples for other people. We can have pain, that's okay. But we can't deal with it, we can't respond to it with depression. And I think that was harder for Barbara than for me because I was like, let's just do something to take care of it, Prozac or, you know, whatever it takes, man, just take care of it because I'm busy and I need to move on. And I don't want to make myself out to be an insensitive jerk, but there was, you know, part of it was, and part of it was I love her so much, I want her healthy, and I can't fix it. And so the anger is mixed with frustration, and the frustration is mixed with deep passion and affection. And so you just work through life.
What are those things that you guys do to work together? You've been through a lot, and that takes work.
We kept praying together. Not every day, but we have been pretty consistent over the last 10 years. We have a place to pray. We have a time to pray. And it's not always easy. Barbara is so industrious that she won't sit down until I sit down. So I'll say, it's time to pray. I go sit down and wait, and then she comes over and we pray. We've not stopped doing that. We will not stop doing that.
Talk about what you guys do to keep your love alive then. You've gone through so many episodes, major things. You wouldn't be here today had you just decided to take off, you know. So what are those things you do to keep your love alive?
Yeah, well, what comes to my mind is that the student asked me just last week, do you think God has someone picked out just for you? I don't know, that's above my pay grade. How would I know what God has in mind? But I do know this, most great marriages I know are not because the perfect couple met, but because the perfect couple was created. And it's over years that we really develop that kind of relationship. And it's never what you see in the movies. It's life, and it is doing life together. And the reason I can say that my love for Barbara is greater than when we got married is because we have experiences. My love is not just the emotion you feel, it's the memories that you hold on to. And when you have enough memories stacked behind you, suddenly you can begin to remember forward. And I already see her and me when we're 75 years old, probably in a golf cart in Sun City, you know, tinkering around somewhere. And those are good memories for me that I already have because I've stacked enough memories behind. For the single person, quit waiting for God to give you the right person. You make the right relationship. That's on you. And I think the greatest marriage advice I've ever heard actually began as political advice when James and John came and asked Jesus for chief seats. And he said, you want to sit on my right or my left? That's only God can give that. I would say to that young person, you're waiting for the right perfect spouse. Only God can give that. But I do know this, that if you want to be a leader in the kingdom, or if you want to be happily married, Jesus said the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. And if you're looking for happiness in someone to serve you, you're probably going to be disappointed. But if you find happiness in serving someone else, there is nothing that can happen in your marriage that will hinder you from being happy by serving another person.
Mark and Barbara gave us a lot of things to think about tonight and a lot of great personal stories. And so, like we've been doing every single week, we would just ask that you could take one thing with you and apply to your life. And so let's do that as we conclude. What is one takeaway, something that you found helpful as you listened to Mark and Barbara share tonight?
Well, I get so excited when we get to hear about the life journey from many of our leaders at CCV, so thank you guys for sharing. You know, this Sunday, our connection events are happening all over the Valley. Thanks in advance for your participation. We've asked every group to step up and host these events to intentionally build relationships with people who are members and attendees of CCV but are not in our groups. Announcements have been made at all 3 campuses and everyone has been encouraged to attend. Please remember, this is simply to get to know other CCV members and attendees living nearby. Please take some pictures. Tell us about all the great things that have happened when you guys got together for your desserts. Share your stories. Hey, we'd like to thank all of you for being a part of our neighborhood groups this past season. On behalf of all of the staff at CCV, enjoy your summer and we'll see you back at your neighborhood group this fall.